Okay, so you've just heard from the Chancellor of the Exchequer today about the UK's ambitions to become a centre for digital assets. So this panel just got a lot more relevant. I'm quite surprised to see a few empty seats, so that's fine, that's their loss. We've got a stellar bunch of people in here representing all the quadrants, really, of digital assets and very serious companies, both in the UK, in Europe, and across the pond in the States. Before we unpack a bit about what Rachel Reeve said earlier in relation to this topic, I want to go back a little bit. So back before lunch, back before Brexit, back before the London Olympics. It's a little hard to carbon date it, but it's around 2009, 2010, when an idea started gestating that it would be a good idea to look at applying the technology that underpins an asset known as Bitcoin and applying it to the lifeblood of capital markets, real-world assets. That, at its core, really, tokenization is about improving the flow of assets and the way value moves between counterparties. And it's a noble and an important application of really the moonshot, I think you can call it, is the future of money itself and improving the way money flows across the world. Now, projections like recollections may vary about this, but at the moment, it's about 0.001% of real-world assets are held on chain. So really the question has to be, is this happening? Are the planets aligning now for tokenization? Or are we still in development hell? Now, happily, I don't have to answer any of those questions. My job is to introduce these excellent people who are going to talk you through, based on their experience, the experience of their companies and their views. So let's crack straight into it. I'm not going to introduce everyone because their names are on the panel. But first, we've got 20 minutes as well. So this is a bit of a speed date, so I apologize for that in advance. First question. So the Chancellor has just told us she wants the UK to be a digital assets hub. How are we going to get there? So perhaps if I can ask Tom to kick off there.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here. I'll try and be very quick. I'm not sure any of us have had time to read it, what's just been published, but on first glances, it looks good. But look, there are echoes of, I think, 2022 IFGS, where John Glenn, who was the EST back then, said he wanted the UK to be a digital assets hub. That was great, very well received. A lot of thinking has been done between 2022 and 2025, but I think if we're all totally honest, we haven't really kind of motored ahead. Today, let's hope with the Chancellor's announcement, which we welcome very much, we have the legislation, and after that, we'll get the regulation from the FCA and the Bank of England. So I think this is an exciting moment, right? This is an exciting time. We're finally moving forward, and we have to, because the US is really kind of motoring ahead, as been discussed on many other panels. I will just quickly say, before handing over to the other panelists, for a tokenization hub here, which is a massive opportunity for the City of London as the financial center, we've got to do a few things. One of which I think is that we need a strategy and we need the legislation. So we have the legislation. The strategy should come in the middle of this year around the city kind of competitiveness and growth strategy. So that's great. We would also advocate really strongly for stablecoins to have a role, a wholesale role in the settlement of kind of tokenized assets. We need to have both the cash and also the assets on-chain in order to derive all the efficiencies of this new technology. That's really important. Second thing that I'd mention is that we should always make sure there's a role for public permissionless blockchains. So you've all heard of Ethereum. Rather than putting all of these kind of tokenized assets on these small closed loops, which we think presents a security risk, not great for resilience, not great for innovation, not great for kind of liquidity, et cetera. Let's use public permissionless blockchains as well, at least. And so that's really important that we kind of do that. And finally, let's think about the kind of post-trade market infrastructure. Let's see what we need to retain from the legacy or the existing kind of system. How do we need to reprofile that to maximize all the efficiencies? So in record time, hopefully, a few quick things that I suggest we do.
Thank you. Matthew.
Thank you. Yeah, so number one, I think, is to recognize the massive opportunity from tokenized assets for the UK. We recently published a report with BCG that forecast that tokenized real-world assets would reach $19 trillion by 2033. So a massive global market, and the UK is really well placed to be a hub for digital assets, trading infrastructure, and settlement. But a few more steps are needed, so to add to Tom's list. So the Chancellor mentioned a couple earlier. So there's the Digital Securities Sandbox, which is a great development. It's a really well-designed framework. Kudos to the FCA and the Bank of England on that. when I go to Europe and talk to policymakers there, they are envious in private of the UK's sandbox because the EU's DLT pilot hasn't quite been so successful. The second is the digital gilt pilot, which the government is running, which they published a consultation on quite recently. And the third thing I'd point out is this really critical but quite nerdy piece of legislation that's been working its way through Parliament that establishes that digital assets are property from a legal point of view, which is a really critical piece of clarification. But I think there's more to do. You know, the progress so far has been a bit piecemeal. You know, really good, welcome progress. But there's some more key things that need to happen. There was a really great report by the City UK and Hogan Lovells back in January. They have an action list for the UK. I agree with a lot that's on that. I think so. Pulling out 3 key things. Number 1 is the dematerialization, the digitization of assets. Other countries have already done this. You know, you can have fully native digital securities. You can't do that in the UK yet. There are some UK specificities to work through, but that is definitely something we should accelerate. Number 2 is the use of digital assets as collateral, which still needs to be settled. And number 3, just to echo Tom, we need a settlement asset. We need an on-chain settlement asset. That needs to be stable coins because they're the only option that's available today.
Well, I think we've shown our commitment to the UK government by joining the DSS. We obviously welcome the Chancellor talking about becoming a digital hub, but we're putting that practice into works by participation. And I think participation is key. I think if we just sit on the sidelines and talk about things, you know, potentially we're not going to move forward. And that's why we at Euroclear have entered the sandbox. You know, we participated in the RFI for Digit. We've done various things as a group across the blockchain universe. But I think for me, I agree with both my esteemed panelists. Very, very exciting times for the UK, but we need people to participate in these initiatives so that we can really prove out and test the sandbox and come up with frameworks and come up with a model that works for the UK before we look at transatlantic models.
Thank you, Nick.
So yeah, so ClearToken's trying to build a clearinghouse, a CCP, as you would know it, for equities and bonds, but for crypto assets, and also a CSD, and it was the first applicant in the sandbox. So in answer to your question about how would you, or how do we make the UK a digital assets hub, I think the first thing is we need trust in the system. That's quite clear. And I think the legislation that's been announced today is going to introduce that trust because basically the infrastructure around trading, clearing and settlement of crypto assets is going to be regulated in exactly the same way as it is for other assets like equities and bonds today. So I think that's a really important thing. But we can talk about digital assets till we're blue in the face because we actually need liquidity. So having digital assets is one thing, but we need liquidity to do that. And I think it's time we all woke up and realized that we're going to a 24/7 market, and that's where we have to be competitive. The US DTC has already started to talk about going 24/5, so 5 days a week. We're still talking about T+1 and can we get it in? And it's like, we need to wake up. Crypto assets have taught us that markets are 24/7. People want to be able to interact whenever they can. So that liquidity is really important. And so I think the final point around that is actually we shouldn't make the mistake that things have to be issued on DLT in order to be tokenized. And I'm a bit worried that the government with Digit is going in that direction because actually you can take a asset like the gilt that is already currently issued in Euroclear Crest and you could tokenize that in a clearing and settlement platform today and get on and make it completely liquid and fungible with any digital assets. So we need to be careful that we don't trap assets somewhere that are issued on a platform that we can't get any liquidity. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go for a moment for this, like, so almost the challenger model, the new tech model, and it's helpful to have that perspective. Kate, the existing financial market infrastructures, what role do those institutions have in the new world. How do you balance, I guess, innovation with maintaining stability? Because you're holding the keys to the car, right? So you've got a higher burden of proof and responsibility than maybe some of the challenger models might have, if you'll forgive me for putting it that way.
Yes, Nick. In a weird way, Euroclear was actually one of the first capital markets fintechs. And obviously, we've evolved into being a very, very stable organization that provides security and a safe ecosystem for participants to come and settle their bonds and securities. But I think what we've been trying to do is focus on what is it that these clients want, and actually listening to industry forums and user groups. Clients don't really care about whether an asset is dematerialized or paper or potentially digital. They want the same infrastructure to wrap around that asset. So if there's liquidity or financing or secondary market, they want it to be seamless and frictionless, and it shouldn't really matter about what technology is being used to issue the asset and B, move the asset around. Now, I think in instances where you can, and particularly, I'm particularly interested in collateral and the collateral use case, where you can unlock previously locked assets and tokenize them and move them onto a chain and start using them for high quality liquid asset collateral. That's something that's very, very interesting to us. But we see ourselves as a bit of a guardian of the existing infrastructure. And so what we're trying to do every step of the way is work with the clients to see how does this make sense in terms of the existing? Because even as we co-create these new solutions, those new solutions are going to sit alongside legacy traditional finance for potentially a long period of time. And in the interim, the clients don't want to be operating on lots of different technology stacks with lots of different interfaces. They want a single view. They want to be able to repo across a pool of assets, and it shouldn't really matter whether those assets are digital or traditional. And so that's our focus on the Euroclear side, is really focusing how do we mesh what we're building so that the experience is seamless for the clients.
Okay, thank you. So turning to the other bit of new, well, there's a number of new announcements and clarifications and directional plays in the Chancellor's comments earlier. One of the things that came up was this idea of a transatlantic digital sandbox. That's a new take on this. You guys are in the sandpit, as it were. What's your first take on that? Is the sandbox, and actually, is it the right approach? Should we be playing the sandbox, or is it time to, should we have started building by now? So, Niki, if I can turn to you first, please.
Look, I think the sandbox is really welcome. I think it's been really well run. I think there's already been comments to say that people are envious of what's been built here. Although we haven't actually got anything live yet in the sandbox. So we need to see how that goes. I mean, one of the worries about sandboxes is you never get a business that's viable enough to get out of that. So hopefully the UK sandbox is going to work effectively around that. I think, look, we would welcome a transatlantic sandbox. We're a clearinghouse. The moment we've got our application finalised with the Bank of England, we're going to be racing to the US in order to engage there and become recognised there. The big question is, who do you speak to? Because we've got multiple regulatory bodies. So look, I think it's a welcome idea. I think there's a lot of things to be rules and ideas to be thought through. And also, sometimes some things don't need to go in a sandbox. So we need to recognise what fits in the sandbox and what doesn't. But generally, I think it's a welcome idea.
The US view, Tom, if you could possibly represent as a US headquartered firm,
Yeah, happy to. Look, I think it's great there's a dialogue. I think the chance to announce both the dialogue and the sandbox, I think both are really welcome. Sometimes looking from this side of the Atlantic, it looks as if some of the things the US are doing are a bit chaotic. I will tell you on this particular topic, there is nothing chaotic about what the US administration is doing, right from the White House through to all the different agencies and through the chairs of the relevant committees in Congress. There's a real determination to move forward and to do something really cutting edge with regard to kind of crypto assets and tokenization. So as the UK is co-creating kind of rules in the sector, I think having a really close dialogue with the US on that is so important. So really, really welcome, that announcement. One thing I'll just say on the sandbox is, in addition to the 2 bits of legislation that I think you kind of mentioned that are going through Congress in the US, actually the SEC is rewriting its existing rulebook right now. That doesn't need to go through Congress, and it is not impossible, it is not science fiction to say that within 12 months, you could be able to trade a wrapped Tesla or an Apple kind of like share on a blockchain. So to Niki's point, it's not just digitally native securities, but we're going to be able to kind of use either a trust structure or a CSD or something, effectively put these things in trust, wrap them and trade the coin. Like, we're thinking through all of that stuff now with the policymakers. So whether we need a sandbox for that, I think helpful, but we're very interested in actually making this a reality, and I'm pretty sure there's a conviction, determination on the US side to make this happen within 12 months, and I would love it if the UK, given the capital market here, the global nature of some of these assets, was able to kind of collaborate very closely with the US.
Well, so maybe I'll bring in a perspective from, we had the US, so I could talk a little bit about the EU. We've mentioned the DLT pilot already. There is a recognition amongst the EU policymakers that the DLT pilot regime has been designed in a way that hasn't encouraged a great deal of participation by the market. But there has been a lot of work done by EU policymakers to identify exactly what the barriers are, what are the problems with that. We're now seeing a lot of ambition. There was a publication a couple of weeks ago from the European Commission which shows a lot of ambition around revamping that sandbox. So I think actually from both the US and the EU, we're now seeing a lot of pressure, a lot of ambition to take forward this technology. So I think the UK needs to move fast if it's not going to fall behind in this area.
Can I just say one thing on that? I mean, I think it's really important to recognise with today's announcement from the Chancellor that we're not going to have a MiCA here. Everything is just going to come under the same legislation that all financial instruments come under. And I think one of the issues with the sandbox in Europe is this alternative regulation. Where do I fit? Am I going to have to run with 2 different regimes? So I think Europe's actually got quite a few things to sort out in relation to MiCA compared to what we've got here.
I mean, we've been working on this topic for over a decade now. It predates Innovate Finance itself. It does fit. Is there something of a vibe shift going on? Do we feel like the conversation, the dialogue is improving, is accelerating? It feels like that at the moment. I'm interested in the general feel of this. You've all been working in this field for a while. Give me your take on that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I can jump in on that one. I mean, like I said earlier, there has been some great progress already. There is a recognition of the benefits of the tech. However, there's not a great deal of understanding. Look, it's a really complicated topic. Not many people actually get this. Not many people understand how tokenization works or how it's beneficial to, say, a firm that's outside the digital assets sector. So I think we do need to do a lot more to explain this technology to policymakers. And then I think that what we need is a much more comprehensive strategy. We need a partnership between government, regulators and the industry to identify the barriers to adoption of this technology and a strategy for removing those.
Thank you. Clock's ticking. We've got a minute left for a topic which could probably take another half hour if you can bear with us. Looking ahead, where do we think we'll be in 5 years' time? Predictions, please. So the tokenized space in the UK.
I think we'll be making huge leaps forward, so hopefully. I think we'll have regulated infrastructure that manages all of this in the same way that we have trading venues and clearing and settlement today, except for they'll be different. There's a new network of participants coming, whether you like it or not. We're going to have a merging of TradFi and DeFi for sure. Hopefully we'll have liquidity, I think, that is 24/7. I think that's going to be revolutionary. I think, first of all, it's about unlocking institutional ability to be able to play in the DeFi markets. But actually, long term, it's really democratizing finance, and it's allowing any individual to basically have an asset that they can use to go and buy a coffee or whatever. I heard a panel earlier actually where people said it was about talking about a debit card, but actually I think we're going in that world with tokenization. You could stay invested in an asset for as long as you want, or you could use your car to get a loan very quickly. All of those things are coming, but we actually have to unlock the institutional market first.
I'm slightly less bullish than Niki, but do feel and hope that we will start to see that tokenization will start creeping into legacy, and my hope is it creeps in a meaningful way. And I think the way we can do it is by looking at the use cases that are going to add the most amount of value. And for me, again, it's looking at areas where historically we've had locked assets and we potentially can't use them for collateral, and the technology now gives us the ability to unlock those assets and move them around and use them as collateral.
Gents, we're clean out of time. Can I get your super hot take on that before I let you go?
I think we're going to see digital assets play a critical role in the competitiveness and growth strategy later this year. I think we're going to see digital gilts within 5 years. That's my prediction. And we're going to see use of those for collateral.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. Sometimes we talk too much about the intermediaries and not about the users of this, so I agree with Niki. I think this is really important for financial inclusion, democratizing access to kind of financial instruments that people hitherto haven't been able to get access to, so I think that's super important. And then just reducing the kind of the cost and the inefficiency with regard to capital raising for SMEs. So that's, those are our clients, right? That's what we're doing this for, and for the UK to remain competitive. And so I'm bullish, maybe less creeping and more running towards this, and I think we're going to make a lot of progress over the next few years.
Guys, thanks so much for your expertise and thinking today. Thank you all for your attention for our panel.
Thank you.